My name is Charlene Margot, and I'm co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture. We are delighted to have with us tonight Ellen Galinsky, who will be talking about her new book, The Breakthrough Years, a new scientific framework for raising thriving teens. Take it away, Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Charlene. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. And I'm going to begin by saying that I'm really thrilled to be with you all today. And I'm going to start by saying that I think being a parent of a teen is very complex. I know that as soon as my son was born, yeah, there's the heart. I agree. As soon as my son was born and he was premature and he came home and we were just thrilled that he was home. He had 10 fingers, he had 10 toes, all the things that he was supposed to have. And a person looked at him and said right away, just wait till he's a teen. And I thought, what? I've just survived, the birth of a premature child. And now I have this sentence hanging over my head. And as a society, I think we give parents a really, we frighten them about being the parent of a teen. In the survey, that question was so powerful to me that I asked other parents in the survey, and I found that 61% of parents had been warned about becoming the parent of a teen. It's not just that. It's not just that kids develop. We are changing and developing too. I wrote a book on parent development a while ago, and one of the things that I learned in it's looking at how parents grow and change is that it's like almost in some ways starting over when you're the parent of a teen. Yes, you recognize that person, but that person sometimes looks different, sometimes acts different. And we're having to figure out how to manage the situations almost like we did with our toddlers. The final thing that I want to say about being the parent of a teen, yes, I agree with that. The final thing that I want to say about being the parent of a teen is that we're marketed to in a very fear-mongering way. I don't know about you, but during the election, candidates on both sides tried to make me very fearful about what was going to happen if this person or that person was going to be elected. It was designed to reach to, to sell to our fear. And people do that because it works. I mean, we're very primed. People are primed to look for things that are fearful. But so much of the marketing, the books, if you look at the titles of books, they're about, the negative things, that our kids are having a mental health crisis, that our kids are anxious, our kids are wild. And in fact, the Frameworks Institute did a survey looking at the media covering teens, and 2-to-1 it was negative. So I think we walk into this needing a lot of support because it's a new time, a different time, and society does not support us or make it easy to us. So most of you, let me see if this moves. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to start with a picture of the cutest little boy in my life. That's my grandson when he was much younger than he is now. And most of us, I think, come to sessions like this with questions in mind. And so my question, the question that I've had, I've done research on kids and parents and work and family life for my whole career. I've been driven by one question, which is, how do we help kids learn and thrive? And to do that, I've looked at parent development, I've looked at work and family life, I've looked at little kids, I've looked at adolescent kids. So I think that you probably are listening tonight because you have a question, and I'd love you to put some of your questions into the chat, because I'd love to think about your questions as I'm talking to you. I've got the chat up, and I hope it stays up as I advance the slides. But I do hope that you'll share your questions with me. Okay. One of the things that I think is so important to understand from the very beginning is that just like early childhood, we now know that the brain development in early childhood is so formative that that the connections that are being made are like building a house. It's like the foundation for a house. And it's a period of what's called high plasticity, which means that we're more responsive to our environments than we are at other times in development. That's also true in adolescence. So adolescence is also a time of very high plasticity. And I really wanted, I'd done studies where I'd listened to adolescent voices. My book, Mind in the Making, was about younger children. And I felt like they were so, that I really needed to understand what was going on during adolescence to continue to answer the question that I've been asking. So how I did this was to use civic science. What civic science means that is that you don't do research on people, you do it with them. So I began with kids. I began by saying, what do you want to know about your own development? If you had one wish to improve the lives of people your age, what would that be? Or what should adults know about people your age? So it's the method of research that I've used in the national studies that I've done of the US workforce, in the studies that I've done about working parents. It really gets at things that other people don't study. And I'll tell you what I found in a moment, but I started with focus groups with 38 14 to 18-year-olds. They were from all over the country, including even some out of this country. Then I went and filmed interviews with 45 leading researchers, largely neuroscientists, and we filmed some of their experiments. Then we took what we had learned and we, with advice from researchers, with advice from young people, created a nationally representative study that was close to 2,000 young people and their parents, pulled out close to 60 of those parents and kids and asked them how they felt about the findings, and then did a follow-up survey because COVID had happened. And I was wondering how the kids were doing during COVID. And then we did a study of executive function skills. So that's how we did the research that I'm going to share with you. So the question that turned out to be the most interesting was, what would you like to tell the adults of this country about people your age? And there are 5 messages from young people that I'm going to share with you tonight. And I'm going to share what the implications, what research shows, what I've found are the implications for action. Charlene said that she was in bed there reading my book. It's meant to be really a comprehensive book. It's not like a book you sit down and read in an evening. It is meant to be very comprehensively covering what we know from kids, from parents, and from research, largely brain development research about kids. So I'm going to give you a taste of that with these 5 messages. The first thing is what young people across America said. The first message said by 21% was, hey, you were a teenager once. Why don't you understand this? Has anyone ever said, you don't understand me to you? I'm wondering. Wish I could see you all. Yeah, people have said it to me. They have said, why don't you understand us? We're smart. We need love. We're difficult, but we really want to be understood. That's really interesting, I think. So I do have a question for you, and I want you to put it in the chat. I actually went out to see how parents understand young people, and I asked them if they had one word or one phrase to describe the teen brain, what would that phrase be? I'm going to ask you to guess what percentage of people use positive words to describe the teen brain. Well, you're going to tell me the words, but thank you. I'm really interested in what percentage use positive words. 40%, 10%, 20%, 90%, not many, 50%. Not nearly enough. That's funny, Mickey. 5%, 10%. Okay. You've really covered the gamut. 15%. You're very close, Lucy. 14%. 14% of parents used positive words to describe the teen brain. This is Lisa Marie talking about why we don't necessarily, she doesn't think that adults understand her. Let's listen to her.
I think that adults in my life aren't really aware of what I struggle with. As much as I try to communicate with them, it's hard, and I try to put myself in their shoes, but I feel like sometimes it's not reciprocated.
So I've asked you to guess, and I've just told you that it is 14% who use that word. Now I'm going to ask you to guess, and some of you already started to. What do you think the most frequent word was? What was the most frequent word that parents used? Some of you said growing, changing, impulsive. People use that word, but it wasn't the most frequent. Frustrating. Yep, people use that. Changing. That was in the 27%. We coded that as a neutral word, changing. Inconsistent. Chaotic. People used all of those words. Keep going. Misunderstood. Challenging. Keep going. Any other guesses? Anybody want to make another guess? Impressionable, overwhelmed, troublemakers, unpredictable. Well, you are picking all of the words they said. Irresponsible. You're picking a lot of the words they said, but not the most frequent. The most frequent word was immature. Does that surprise you? Anybody surprised by that? Yes, Charlene is surprised. Yes, thank you. It's hard to sort of talk and just look into your own slideshow. So thank you for responding. I really like to have this as the conversation. If you were a researcher, what would you make of the word? 11% used that word, and another 8% used words that meant immature, like unfinished, incomplete. Yeah. So Anika is saying, I think the negative experience is based on not over the loss of control of your kid, and I think that's very hard. You're not surprised it is true. Yes, they are not adults. Yep. But how would you feel if someone called you something that you're not? Like, would we call a toddler an immature preschooler, or would we call an infant an immature toddler? The brain continues to develop. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's non-validating. So I think that, in the negative words, we're focusing on what kids are not. And I think this leads me to the fact that we need a new story about brain development. And you're talking about the brain is not fully developed. And you've probably heard, yes, they are immature compared to adults, but they're appropriately mature compared to teens. And that's exactly right, Steph. I think that's exactly right. They are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. You may have heard the story about teens that their thinking part of their brain develops more slowly than the emotional part of the brain. Have you all, any of you heard that story? Yeah, the prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop. But actually, what's interesting about that, and that's why I say it's time for a new scientific story about the teen brain, is that it really differs. Now, I want you to all think of a group of seventh graders standing in a line. And you'll see some that are very big, some that are very tall, some that do look like grown-ups, some that look like little kids. You see all of that difference. And what the story about the notion of the prefrontal cortex not fully developing until the mid-20s is an average, but it doesn't really represent the individual differences among kids. That it is, that with actually probably the majority of the kids, their prefrontal cortex is as developed as the reward center. So that's why I think we need a new story. And it also depends on the circumstances. They can make very smart and very good decisions. But the point is that they're learning and they're doing exactly what they should do. Their emotions, they are more reactive to rewards. Adolescents are more reactive to rewards than younger kids and older kids. And think about it, we wouldn't really leave the nest unless we were really intense, whether we had that push to go out, whether we wanted to explore. And the brain is primed to explore. That's what's happening. So I think it was Steph who wrote, they're doing exactly what they should be doing at this age, and they are. They're primed to explore, and they're learning how the skills that they'll need to manage. Remember I showed you the slide about what a plastic period this is? What's happening during this period is that they're developing the skills to learn the skills that manage for their whole life. I see that you've raised your hand. How do we want to do that? Do we want to have people write the question in the chat, or do we want to, I don't know if we can put her on.
We're not set up for hand raising, everybody, but you can put questions for the Q&A in the Q&A box or keep putting comments and questions in the chat.
I'll read them in the chat, but I can't read them in the Q&A right now.
Okay, then everybody keep putting things in the chat.
Okay, so Shilipi, am I saying your name right? Would you mind just putting it into the chat? The question that you have, and I'd be happy to answer it or talk to it. The other thing that's important about the teen brain is that and the why I say we need a new story is that they're not less afraid of danger. Some people said, well, they do. Most researchers have studied negative risk taking, and they are learning to be brave. They get more fearful. Their emotions are very high, and they need that to be able to figure out what's safe, what's not, and they're learning to be brave. They're learning to take on challenges. So it really is a time for us understanding team development as a time when the brain is exploring and when they're learning skills versus they're a deficit adult. I think it's really important to change our story to better fit the research. And almost all of the researchers whom I interviewed, the neuroscientists, said that they really don't like this old story of the incomplete, the car without brakes, the deficit adult teenager. That really doesn't describe what we know about from the research. So the implications for this are that how we respond, how we respond to children is what they're really like. And I think before we say, oh, you're acting like such a teenager, yes, they're supposed to be teenagers, we can pause and think about what they're supposed to be doing in their development, because how we see them is what we do. In fact, studies show that if we see adolescents as prone to doing crazy and wild and stupid things, that they're going to act more that way. So having a positive spin on their development and understanding it is really important. The second message that was important to kids was listen and talk with us, not at us. One young person, and he was actually from California, from your area, in fact, it was a nationally representative study, so I don't even know his name, but I know that he was from your area of California. And he said, I asked him, what are the most important skills that parents have? And he said, listen more than you talk. And when you listen with, when I had a child's mind as well as an adult mind. So kids, it's really important for kids to feel that we understand them. We're not judging them. We're not judging them negatively. A couple of weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving, I was at a school in Washington, D.C., and was talking to the leaders of the school. They waited to talk to me, the kids, and they waited to talk to me. This was a group of seniors and juniors, till after the talk. And then they said, one of the things that they would really like is that we're supposed to be emotional. We're supposed to feel things deeply. And my mother says, oh, stop being such a drama queen, and that's the way that's normal for us. That's what we're supposed to be like. So they really want to be validated and understood. You can say that they could talk in a different way and you could listen differently, but calling them names, disparaging them doesn't really work. Here's Gideon talking about this.
Adults should be mindful with feelings when talking to teens because we are very vulnerable. Being patient is a big part of keeping us comfortable with talking to adults.
You may wonder where I got these videos. After I did the study, we went out to a school, a regular school, asked for a group of kids, and asked them the same questions that we ask in the study. So these weren't kids in the study, but they're saying the same things that we heard in the study, which I think is really important and interesting. So how do we best deal with challenges? That's how they're feeling, but it isn't always easy being the parent of a teenager. So how do we deal with the challenges? And there is research on this. I'm going to start with the research on the left with younger kids. This is research by Stephanie Carlson. You can see that Sesame Street puzzle there. What Stephanie Carlson at the University of Minnesota and her colleagues did was give parents and kids, and these are preschool kids, a puzzle to do that was just a little too hard for them, and then watch at how the parent interacted with them. And they found that parents did three things. One was they stepped back and did nothing. Two, they stepped in and did the puzzle for the kids. Or three, they were autonomy supportive, which is that they let the child take the lead. They understood what the child could do or couldn't do. And when the child needed help or asked for help, offered helpful hints. So they stretched the child. They were providing autonomy support, which means that they weren't fixing things for the children, but letting children learn to fix it for themselves. Okay, fast forward over to the research to the right, which is done by Wendy Grolnick. Wendy Grolnick is at Clark University. She gave parents and kids homework to do together. Write a poem, or here's a map, figure out how to get from one place to another with a map. And then again, instead of just saying do what you would normally do, which is what Stephanie Carlson did, she put pressure on the parents. With one group of parents, she said, your child is going to be judged by this. And with another, it didn't say that at all. This is just to see, how you and your child do this together. And found that when parents felt pressured, they tend to pressure the kids. And so it's really important to help children learn to do things themselves. In this particular study on autonomy support by Wendy Grolnick, she found that when parents didn't do the homework for the children learned it much better. If the parent stepped in and helped the child too much with the poem or the map, when the parent left and they gave a child an assessment to see how the child had learned it, not so well. So it's important to be autonomy supportive, but for us and for kids, pressure on it makes it harder. The second thing that I want to say, so being autonomy supportive is really important. The second thing that I want to say is that just say no doesn't work. There have been so many studies of interventions with kids, from stop smoking to bullying to drugs to drinking to cell phones, and we can talk about that, where if the adult says, just don't do it because I said so, adolescents need some autonomy. And in the research on smoking, when that approach was used, smoking actually increased. But there are interventions that actually work, and those interventions are autonomy supportive. When the kids become part of the solution, and this young man from California said this, he said, if we're the problem, then we need to be part of the solution. When kids can problem solve to come up with solutions, they're much more likely to follow them. So what does autonomy supportive means? It means building the skills of young people. It means not fixing things. I've said that before, not fixing things for kids, but helping them to gain the skills eventually to learn to solve problems for themselves. And you do that differently with a little kid and a bigger kid, but that's important. We found that autonomy support has a number of different steps. One is checking in on yourself. Remember the parent who got pressured about the homework. If we're feeling all, upset about something, it's harder to be autonomy supportive. So find a way, if we can, to calm down ourselves. 2, understand our kids' perspective, what they can do and what they can do. Now, we're the adults, so we set expectations, limits, reasons, smoking, drinking, any of the things that dealing with social media and so forth, setting limits, but limits plus autonomy, which means that adolescents have some say and they problem solve together. Here's a method that I've used as a parent. I used it as a teacher. I've used it as a parent, and continue to teach this to families. And it really is pretty amazing. I call it shared solutions, which is you begin by setting the goal, whatever the goal is. I'll use video games and homework as an example. This is a parent whom I talked to a few weeks ago whose kid would come home from school. School was hard for him. He'd throw down his stuff, litter the hallway, run into the sofa, grab his device, and get on games. And then his mother was like, well, I get a little bit of a break and I can finish work. She was working from home. On the other hand, the homework never happened. The stuff was all over the floor, and then they'd have a fight later, and he would be really tired by that time. So they had a family meeting to resolve that, and they stated the problem. What we're doing isn't working, and for all the reasons that I just explained. And then they asked their child to come up with as many solutions as he could come up with, and they could make suggestions too. Then they asked their child to consider the pluses and minuses of each solution. So that's looking at it from both the parent's view and his own view. So this would work for me, but it wouldn't work for you. And so the child is using the skill of perspective taking there. Generating as many solutions as possible is creative thinking. So think of all the cognitive skills that are being used here. And then they selected a solution to try as an experiment. You don't say you're going to do it forever. You're going to say, let's see how this works. With this child, what he decided was to come in a different door, nothing the parents ever would have thought of. So when he came home from school, he came in from a different door, and he then said that he would make a decision at that point whether he'd spend 45 minutes playing games to calm down from school and then do his homework, and he'd set a timer, so he made sure that he stopped. And then he would do his homework first, depending on how he felt. And now it's been about 6 weeks. I talk to the mother every once in a while. I email her and ask her how it's going, and it's going very well. So if it is going well, you keep doing it. If it isn't, you come up with it again. I see that we've got some raised hands again, so I hope you'll put the questions or comments into the chat so that I can see them. Anika says this follows best practice in innovation research. Yeah, it is. I think a building on autonomy, and you're not fixing it for your child, and you're helping your child learn skills. So let me keep going. I love the way Ashley, who's 14, talked about autonomy support.
My parents sometimes hold the leash too much. Eventually, I'm gonna grow, so maybe not just let go of the leash, but walk with the leash. Kids suffer when they're older. Since they've been holding the leash for so long, they're used to it and they're not able to expand and build upon other things.
So this approach, I call it hold with, walk with the leash. Walk with the leash. Don't fix things for kids. Give them limits. They need limits to feel safe. We're the adults, but help them learn to solve problems themselves. So here's another way of dealing with conflicts. I told you that I pulled a group of parents from the nationally representative study, and I interviewed them, and I asked them this question: tell me about a time when you lost it. And I asked them to go through the whole thing, like, okay, your child did this. How did you respond? What did you feel? What did you think? What did you say? What did you do? And then what happened, sort of walking me through it as if I were in their mind and going through all of the feelings with this time when they lost it. And lost it means not always yelling or doing things like that, but just not being the parent that you want to be. And I found that three things were going on, which I think is also an important way that we deal with challenges. I found that people either had what was more of an adversity mindset or a possibilities mindset. And there are three things in those mindsets that are important. An adversity mindset or a possibility mindset, first, is that things can or can't change. Two, that I see this as a threat. In an adversity mindset, I feel threatened. And if you feel threatened, it creates a we-they feeling, a fight or flight kind of a feeling. Or I see it as a challenge. It's really hard, but I think I think that this is, not a threat. It's a challenge. And those take places in different parts of the brain. And the third thing that's important is self-efficacy. So for those of you who know Carol Dweck's work, this builds on what she's done with the notion of things can or can't change. She calls it a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. But I think there's more, and that's what I was hearing from the parents. One is how we deal with stress, whether we lean into stress or whether we just see it as a threat, and then whether we think we can solve the problem. So I found that this makes a difference because we can have all the good intentions in the world, but not really do them. Our mindsets matter in terms of carrying out the goals that we have for ourselves. So we developed a measure of this. We've taught it to teachers now. We've taught it to parents. In our study of adolescence, we looked at to what extent parents have this mindset or don't. We found that we have both. We have a little bit of an adversity mindset, a little bit of a possibility mindset. So it's a matter of more or less. But the parents who had more of an adversity mindset, the kids were under a whole lot more stress, controlling for everything we could control for. And the kids whose parents had more of a possibilities mindset had less conflict with their parents, and the parents used a disciplinary approach that involved listening and problem solving with their kids. So the implications of this research are to shift the way you think about problems by dialing up the possibility and dialing down adversity mindset. And you'll see that we're putting resources in the chat that keep explaining this. So the next message was, don't stereotype us or label us. Remember, I told you that I talked to 38 kids before I started this study, and what they said was, why don't people like teenagers? Why are people so negative about us? And they said, I want you to ask researchers for what words they would use to describe the stereotypical teenager or the teenager who is the teenager that they study. And they were really interested in our views of adolescence. And in fact, I found that, and this was 38% of an open-ended question. This is a huge number of people. They don't want to be called the anxious generation. They don't want to be called, drama queens or, and they will say, yes, there's some kids, some of us have problems like taking drugs or being entitled or being addicted to technology, but not all of us. Don't label us, don't look at us negatively. We're going to go on, if I can get that forward, and listen to Natalie talk about it.
We're not spray painting the sides of houses. We're not on our phones till 3 a.m. every night. We're not these crazy stereotypes and things that adults claim that we are.
So researchers have mostly studied the negative aspects of teenagers, looking at why teenagers take negative risks. There are thousands of studies. This is a study of where they simulate driving and see which kids will run a yellow light as a measure of risk taking that has been done. Larry Steinberg, who did this study, then later on looked to see how many studies there were of kids taking positive risks, meaning that you take a course that might be hard, you stand up for a friend, you do something good for the community, you take drama or something that you might not normally take, and found that there were only 3 studies, this is in 2019, only 3 studies on positive risks. So it's not just, the society at all, adolescent researchers for a long time were just looking more at the negative sides of teenagers, but positive risks actually help kids grow. So I think that it's important to provide positive risks for kids, things like encouraging them to take a class where they don't know something, or standing up for something that they believe, or starting a friendship with someone, even if they're not so sure how their other friends would react to it. I know that with our 11-year-old now, we look very hard for finding things, and soccer for him is what it is, where he can really challenge himself, because he's at his best when he's being challenged. Message 4 is that we're trying to understand ourselves and our needs. And this was a very interesting search for me. Let's listen to Crystalline first.
Adults should know the importance of belonging. They should know that when you are developing, you need people around you that are like-minded. Having a sense of community inside of your own community is something that's so important in teen development. You have to be able to find other peers to connect to and talk to, and just be able to be around them and be yourself and have fun without fear of being judged.
Yes. And belonging, we tend to think about belonging for some kids, or we think about it as a nice to have. What I discovered in this research is that it is something that is like a psychological need that we all have. That what I did was I looked at when adolescents' brains were most activated, and it was about when they were rejected or not, when they were treated with respect or not, when they felt that they had some autonomy or not. And this fits a theory of research that's been done for the last 40 years that shows that when these needs are met, it's much more motivating for children, that it helps them thrive. Meeting these needs is very, very linked to the mental health and the well-being of children. And in fact, I could test this in my study. I looked at here, I'm going to go back for a second. I found that there are 5 basic psychological needs that we have by looking at the literature. One is having people who care about you and support you, having some sense of agency, which means that you have autonomy and you're treated with respect, feeling a sense of mastery, and these are all things that we give to other people. Mastery means a sense of competence, but also being challenged, being able to figure out who you are, which is the task of being a teenager, and then having some way to do things that are meaningful and that contribute to your community. Purpose, but that's with a small p, not in like finding your purpose in life, which, is a journey, not something that you figure out when you're a teenager, but something that is so important is finding ways to give back. I'll answer the gender question in a moment, but thank you so much, Anna, for asking. And teenage daughter being left out, great, thank you. Really happy that you're beginning. How is identity different from purpose? Great question. Identity is figuring out who you are, what the kind of person that you want to be. Purpose is doing things for yourself and for others. So it's helping to do things that are meaningful to you, but also help improve the world for other people. So it may be cooking dinner for your grandmother. I would say that my grandson feels a real sense of purpose and contributing when he waits at the street corner and makes sure that I can cross the street okay, because I don't walk as fast as his parents who are, well the way down the street and I'm still back there. And he'll always turn around and wait for me. And that's a way of contributing. And purpose is really about contributing. And identity is figuring out who you are and trying on different identities as teenagers do as you figure that out. Purpose can be part of that, but it's giving back to others as well as giving to yourself. I tested all of these things in the study that we did. I asked, to what extent do your family, do your friends, do the people at school, do the people in out-of-school activities, do the people in, which means OSA, or do the people online make you feel that you belong, or treat you with respect, or help, give you opportunities to give back, to contribute. And what you see is that 9 months later, during the pandemic, which was a really rough period in our lives, that this is how these kids were doing if they had people in their lives who met these basic psychological needs. So really important. And this is at the 0.0005 level for those of you who are into statistics, with every control that we could put on. So the implications, this is research that Greg Walton has done. The book is full of so many interesting researchers, but Greg Walton did these studies. I'll tell you about women in science because someone's just asked a gender question. These were women who were going into science, and there were often fewer women than men there. And they did an intervention called a social belonging intervention, Greg Walton and his colleagues did, where it was just an hour or so intervention on a computer, where they had kids come in and first read stories about how everyone felt that they didn't belong when they first went to college. This is about women going into science courses in college, that whether you were male, whether you're female, whether you were black or white or Latina, or that everyone feels that they question whether or not they belong in the beginning. And then they read some research on it. And then they were asked to write an essay about what they could do for other people coming into school to help them understand that feeling that belonging is not belonging is normal. That little intervention that they did predicted who dropped out of school, who didn't, better grades that they had, and actually their well-being into the future. So meeting those needs, and there's so many studies like that, really help kids thrive. Okay, and I'm not going to show you the video. Let's see, message 5, because I want to make sure we have time for questions, is the importance of lifelong learning skills. Kids are saying, we want to learn stuff that's meaningful. We want to learn the skills that we're going to need in the future. This is Amani.
Open about it. Sometimes when we make mistakes, it's kind of like it's the end of the world and not just like a mistake. I just think sometimes if they could put themselves into our shoes and just know that like it was a mistake and that it's okay.
In other words, learning is trial and error, and we want to learn the way we learn best, and we want to be able to learn things that are useful. So what helps young people learn and thrive? And here, the importance of executive function skills. These are the skills that studies show are more important than IQ or socioeconomic status to thrive. What are they? They're focus, they're attention-focused skills. They involve working memory, that is using what you know, thinking flexibly, being able to reflect, pause, talked about pausing before, and use self-control in order to meet a goal. And they become the cognitive building blocks for lifelong learning skills like goal setting, like perspective taking, like communicating and collaborating, like problem solving, and like taking on challenges. These are the skills that employers want. When you ask employers what they're looking for in the workforce, it's people who can work in teams, who can solve problems, who can communicate. So I am now working with AASA to help develop training and tools to help make sure that kids are learning these skills in school, not just content areas, but learning these learning and thinking skills. And they really do help us, for example, take on challenges. In this case, this is research by Ethan Kroos, who found that we've talked about the importance of leaning into stress, stepping back and talking about yourself. If you're really under a stressful situation, this is the skill of taking on challenges. If you're in a stressful situation, he found that people talking about themselves in the second or third person, what would Ellen do, really had a different reaction in the brain. It wasn't in the threat part of the brain, it was in the challenge part of the brain, and they could handle a stressful situation much better. So 5 takeaways from this talk is understand kids' development, talk with them, not at them, by supporting their autonomy, promote positive risks, provide environments where kids can belong and contribute, and help them learn the skills that they need, like taking on challenges. Everybody has someone that they do work for. And I've done this work. This book took me 9 years to do, in addition to having a job. And I really did it so that my grandson, who's now 11, could have a life, I hope, where people will not greet teenagers the way that they have done for generations. I hope that what I've learned will make a difference, that he can keep the joy that he's born with, that he keeps his sense of adventure, that his psychological needs are met, that he always has something that he wants to learn about, and that he learns the skills that will help him thrive in the future. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing, and now we can go to questions.
Oh, that ending to your grandson, Ellen, was just so beautiful. Everybody, is there a link to that? That was incredible. So, Ellen, we're going to take some audience questions, but I wanted to start by asking, do you feel that this book, the reaction and the talks that you've been giving are making a difference in helping people be more positive about teens? That 14% using positive words about teen brains, that's pretty shocking.
I hope. It's why I do it every single day. I just hope, and what you all are doing with Parent Venture, I think will make a difference. It's going to take an army of us to try to turn the tide, because frankly, people sell by marketing to our fears. If I had written a book that said every kid is in a mental health crisis, it would freak everyone out, which wouldn't help them deal with it better, but it would have gotten a huge amount of attention. So, we're swimming upstream, but I think that if there was any lesson from the election, it's that we have to listen. And I'm hoping that people will actually listen to kids and see what impact this negative stance toward teenagers has on them. I mean, if we talked about any other group in this country the way we talk about kids, teenagers, it would be really bad. But
Oh, I know. You're so right. This organization, the Parent Venture, we take what we call a competence-based view of parenting, just like you're talking about kids. People love that, but so much of the parenting advice out there is so negative, so fear-based, right?
it is fear-based because it sells, and it's why politicians use it. It's why people who try to talk to parents use it, and it doesn't help us.
Yes,
Doesn't help us be the parent we want to be, I don't think, or the grandparent we want to be.
exactly. And parents, as Ellen points out so eloquently in her book, guess what? If you have a more positive view of your child, they're going to do better. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Wonderful.
Okay, so we've talked about kind of wandering around in the forest. Ellen, here's some questions with people, all of us together doing that. Stephanie asks, how do I help my teenage daughter who continues to be left out by her friends?
That is such a good question, and without knowing more, I'm going to answer in general ways. I'm wondering whether she'll talk about it. I'm wondering whether she's got any ideas for ways that would help. You can want to belong, but unless the environment lets you belong, you can't belong. So I'm wondering whether the school has any sort of culture where they want to have kids get along better. I looked at a lot of schools will sometimes think this isn't our job, but they're so wrong. Because if you're feeling left out and worried about being rejected, it's much harder to learn. And one school that I profile in the book had something called Crew, where the idea was that unless you're rowing together, you're not going to get anywhere. And so there are just so many interventions that schools could do to create better environments. If your child, I mean, really all it takes is one person. So if there's a way of doing a different sport, joining a different club, doing something where you meet different people, could help as well. But, often kids will come up with ideas themselves to try to figure this out. And it's sadly something that all of us go through when we're teenagers. We're all rejected at one time or another. And that's an important thing to learn, because we learn what kind of people we want to hang out with and who we really feel the most comfortable with and whom we like to be with too.
Well, and as the Dalai Lama says, my religion is kindness. Parents, I think you'd agree, Ellen, we can also teach our kids, if they see a child sitting alone at the lunch table, go be a friend, go ask a question, sit down with them. Yeah. All right, here's a lovely question. Ellen Asker says, how is your own journey as parenting teens? Any key learnings that you want to share?
Well, I asked my children that question because I figured I would be asked. My children are grown up. So I asked them, how did I really screw up? Tell me what I did wrong. And they each had a different answer. I'll tell you what they said I did wrong, and I'll tell you what they said I did right. They said that I screwed up a lot. I made lots of mistakes, but they said that the thing that I did that mattered the most to them was that I would talk about it. That they could come to me and say, that's, that is, mother, don't do that, that there was an openness, as long as they were kind, there was an openness always that I had to listening to their telling me that I was not doing something well or right or what worked for them. And so they didn't feel that they had any big issues from when they were adolescents. So that was what they each of my kids separately said, that an openness to talk. It was a gift that they felt, that they could tell me how they felt about things and that I would listen. And I could tell them too. I mean, believe me, if I didn't like a friend or this, that, or the other, I could say that too. We could say those sorts of things to each other. The thing that my daughter said that I gave her in a good sense that I really liked, that she really liked, was that fear means go. And she says I said that, and I don't really remember saying it, but if I said
Go, is that
fear
what you
means go, fear means go, which is that, I mean, not to do something really, jump off a cliff or something, but if there's something that worries you, you're afraid of, do it, find some way to do it. And that has been the most important thing that she feels she learned from me.
That is just beautiful, Ellen. It reminds me of Dr. Jess Shatkin, who wrote a book called Born to be Wild. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
And his point is, there's had to be somebody guarding the cave during the night. Those were the teenagers. They have a job and a role, and we need to respect that, right?
Well, they are more emotional, because that in all species, in all cultures, because that's what gets you to move away from home, that sense of adventure that they have, which is why positive risks are so important.
Oh, it's really beautiful. All right, Ellen, we literally have 1 minute together. What kind of parting words would you like to leave us with tonight? We are so grateful.
Stephanie asked if she could reach out to me individually to talk about her daughter. Yes, you can give her my email address. Absolutely. I'm sorry, say it again.
Just kind of parting words, Ellen, to leave us with tonight.
Well, I hope that you will be on this journey with me. I hope that the articles that I put in the chat are useful. I hope you'll join my Substack. Please do. I hope you will tell me things that you want me to write about. I feel deeply immersed in this research. I've spent 9 years talking to the best minds in the country, doing incredible research, having the joy of talking to kids. So I hope that you will join this journey, join the Substack. Love it if you read my book, but you can read the free articles too. And I know my publisher would like me to say that. But join this, join this journey. I think that if I can't turn this around by myself, but we all can.
Thank you so much, Ellen Galinsky, for this brilliant talk tonight. Parents, I hope you feel a renewed sense of inspiration and confidence that, these are our kids. We got this. We just got to be positive and listen to them. I think that's really important. Look at that. Everybody agrees with us. Thank you, everybody, for your kindness and for being a great audience and supporting one another and asking good questions. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much, Ellen Galinsky, for your brilliance and bringing all of this work to us to make us better parents. Take care, everybody. Take 1 minute and fill out that survey. Hope to see you again soon. Good night, everybody.